If you're trying to get better at fly fishing, a really good way to do it is by fishing the saltwater flats. It's streamer fishing like you've never done before. It's way more dynamic and honestly quite difficult. So if you're just starting out and you're interested in that, there are a few places you can go in the world where you can cut your teeth. This is actually one of them. What's up, fishy friends? This is Pablo here. Surprise, we have a gift for you. It's 10% off at the lodge I operate, the Ishkalak Paradise Fly Fishing Lodge. The biodiversity and the amount of trophy fish available to you will allow for many shots, which you don't always get on a saltwater flat. It's all within such close proximity to the lodge, it means you have more time to fish and less time traveling in a boat to get to fishing. If you're a more seasoned angler, it's a great spot to try and get the infamous Grand Slam. The lodge itself is small but beautiful. It only sleeps 8 people, so you could grab some of your buddies and literally take the place over. If you're interested in any of this, send me an email at pablo@xcalak.mx. Thanks a lot, and we'd love to have you. Yo, I'm Pablo.
And this is Lance, and you're listening to
the Noob and the Knower Fly Fishing Podcast. In this podcast, we pair a driven angler with a seasoned professional to take you from total noob to a fly fishing nerd.
Yeah, we cover reading water, gear, fishing techniques, and much, much more.
With Mr. Lance Egan, star of hit video series Modern Nymphing, Fly Fishing Team USA medalist, and professional guide.
That's right, and here co-hosting, asking the questions on your behalf, is avid fly fisher and outfitter owner Pablo Signori.
So now, let's hit the water. Fish on!
Fish on.
And we are back. Welcome to the Noob and the Knower podcast, How to Fly Fish with Lance Egan. Thanks for joining us. My name is Pablo Signori, if you haven't known that by now. We got some fun stuff today. We sourced some questions from our listeners, and we made a list of questions to be answered on this podcast. I should let everyone know that Lance is currently using his Traeger to barbecue some turkey legs. Is that what you said it was, turkey legs?
They're just turkey loins, yeah.
Oh, loins, okay.
Tenderloins,
Okay.
turkey tenderloins.
He warned me. He might have to stop in the middle to go flip them or something.
Check the temps.
Oh, check
Put
the temps.
some olive oil, butter, and apricot jam on them.
Oh, wow.
That good stuff.
That sounds
Yeah.
delicious. It's kind of funny
It does.
because I am a decent Argentine griller. I do whole animals and the whole sort, but I don't know very much about American barbecue because I spent pretty much half my life trying to master the Argentine style. But I really want to diversify the portfolio and get into American stuff.
I'm not good at either of them, but I do like to do some things on the Traeger now and then. It makes it easy.
It sounds like you are good at them. Yeah, I don't have a
I'm
smoker
not
and I don't have
really.
room for it because I have this massive Argentine grill. And then the people that lived here before left this gas grill, which is nice because I converted it to gas line that's on the back of my deck and it's very practical. So I need to figure out what to do with that because I do want to get into smoking things this summer. And technically my grill, I designed it so that it would be a smoker, but I haven't really tested that very well. So I could try it and start there, but we'll see. Stay tuned on that. That's my point. Anyhow, how are you doing, Lance?
I'm pretty dang good. How about yourself?
I'm all right. Have you been fishing at all lately?
I have been. I was out 3 days this last week. Did a little stillwater fishing a couple of the days and some river fishing one of the days.
Very, very cool. I just listened to your podcast on wet fly swing
Oh, yeah?
with Dave. It was great. Thanks for cheating on me, bro.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the shout out.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were together, let's say.
Entangled?
Entangled.
Classic Lance. He got queued up really well to talk about the podcast. He's like, that guy's very animated. He's really good at his job. And he's like, so, I love talking about podcasts because I'm a podcaster and I have a bunch of podcasts. Tell me about your podcast. You're like, yep, I have a podcast. It's with my friend Pablo Signori. Crickets. I was like, dude.
Crickets.
No, it was
I don't
awesome.
remember that, but
it was,
I don't. I'm sure that I was quite dull.
No, you were great. You were great. You still sounded pro. You were like, yeah, no big deal. I got a podcast. This isn't my first time doing this.
Yeah.
So it was a good one. That was so interesting. Very cool to hear. And it's like a cool setup too, where it's like he talked to Phil Rowley first and then you afterwards in separate conversations, which was kind of cool to hear. Like same trip, I think, right?
Yeah, slightly different times of year. I think a month or so separated our trips, but the same place, same year.
I get you. Yeah, That was sweet. That place sounds absolutely incredible. It's on my bucket list now.
Yeah, it's a fun one for sure.
But it seemed unreal.
Indeed.
The last little thing I'll say, just for the listeners, so that they know that we practice what we preach today, because today we're recording not like we normally do. We normally record on Tuesdays late at night. Today is Sunday. We were able to break away from our family, not from the Traeger, but from our family. And we're recording not too late. I wanted to announce that I went to the casting pier today for 3 hours to practice my casting, including Euro nymphing casting. If you do Euro nymph and you haven't gone and just practiced casting, I would highly recommend doing it. I only spent like 45 minutes on it because the whole other time I was practicing the streamers, and in just that short amount of time, I felt like I made massive gains.
Cool.
So this might be my new thing because I haven't really spent any time Euro nymphing the last probably year or two. I've just been getting into dries, so I got to keep, the skills sharp.
Casting is a worthy thing to put time into for sure.
Truth. We got to bring Coach back. I kind of phased him out, but maybe he should be back. Do you remember Coach at all? It's like,
oh, that Coach.
He used to chime in with that. I'm gonna have to bring him back.
He wants to be back on. He's been texting me.
He gets pretty angry. All right, so let's start this Q&A. We're going to do this in 2 parts. I've kind of separated the questions here. Thank you so much to everybody that responded. That was so cool. We got a lot of questions in a very, very short amount of time. It was very helpful because we're always wondering what people want to know. And at this point, we're in season 4. We've covered a lot of stuff. So it almost makes sense for us to get a little bit more granular and pick your guys' brain and see, where your head's at and what things you want help on or what random questions you have. I also myself have a couple that I've added in here, so we can talk about those when they come into play. So we've broken it down into sections. In part 1, we're going to talk about
Flies, lines, leaders, casting, nymphing, and ethics.
So let's get into it.
Let's roll.
Flies. This comes from Spencer.B and something else, but we can't say his last name. Okay, so he asks, the one I get the most is, what should I use this time of year? What flies are good right now? I think he's suggesting that people ask him, but I'm not sure.
Right.
What should I use this time of year? What flies are good right now?
That makes sense. I think you're right. I think he's suggesting that's the question he hears most often, right?
Yes.
Which flies are working right now? That's the question we get asked in the shop all day, every day. What's working right now? And the answer to that changes, of course, throughout the year. And depending on the fishery you're going to, I don't have a direct answer for that unless you're going to my local waters, which right now you want blue-wing olives and midges and attractor nymphs and streamers. How's that for narrowing it down?
That's pretty good.
But I think the answer to this question is to check local fishing reports, check with a fly shop near where you're trying to fish, see what kind of intel you can get, maybe contact a guide or a guide service and see if they put fishing reports up and or are willing to share their report and or maybe even hire them for a half a day or a full day and get the scoop that way.
Sure. And I also think as far as flies go, depends on what style you do, but I feel like there's a lot of flies that work year round that if you were unsure, you could be like, well, like a zebra major, some sort of Euro version of that is a good example of like a fly that might just work year round.
Yeah.
Or, a Frenchie,
Yeah. Very good point. I like that. You're spot on there that there are lots of flies that when presented properly will catch fish most of the time, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it's not directly imitating something the fish are seeing that at that particular point. A lot of our flies that work best are pure attractors. So I like that. That's a good thought for sure.
Okay, cool. So maybe, you could start there and then try and add to sort of that collection there. All right, let's keep moving. This one comes from Trap Drummer, which if you are a drummer playing on a trap song, you're my hero. He says, do you think synthetic peacock herl is as effective as real peacock herl on zug bugs? Thanks. Good question. Love that.
That was a good one. I think I'll make this one a little more general than just zug bugs, since I probably haven't fished a zug bug since I was like 16 or 15.
Yeah, I've never fished one. I know it's...
I'm not suggesting they're not good because I caught lots of fish on them, but for whatever reason, they grew out of my normal repertoire of flies. But I'm going to say there's no concrete answer there. I am more confident with peacock herl on certain patterns and more confident in synthetic dubbings or other options for imitating peacock herl in other flies. So like I haven't tied prince nymphs either for many years because the red dart kind of took over my Prince Nymph place in my box. But when I did tie princes, I used ice dub and peacock color. And that kind of transitioned into my red dart pattern that uses that same dubbing.
Cool. That's good to know. I didn't realize that.
On the flip side of things, like a fly that I use a lot in still water is called the Dalbach, and it's tied with peacock curl. And I do not like it nearly as much without the peacock curl. With peacock dubbings, I'm not nearly as confident. I wouldn't dare say fish won't eat it, but when I've tried alternatives for it, they don't eat it as well. And some of that probably has to do with my confidence. But so I don't know that there's a quick answer for you there. I would suggest on a zug bug in particular, I doubt that the peacock itself is crucial to the pattern. I think the overall bugginess to that fly, it doesn't look exactly like anything, but could be a bunch of different things, much like a Prince Nymph. And so I think you could probably tie a zug bug with, peacock dubbing or something and have very similar results. But there is something kind of magic about natural peacock, right? It's iridescence, it's natural sparkle without being overpowering sparkle. So I don't know, maybe try both and figure that one out for yourself, see which one gives you more confidence.
Yeah, and I was thinking synthetic's a lot more durable, right?
Significantly.
If you're using real peacock, you're kind of forced to use wire or some sort of like mono to go around it, right?
Yes.
So that could be one caveat if you don't want that. If we're not talking about the zug bugs, we're just talking about something else. But that's one thing that could be added. I tend to not use peacock curl that often just because of that. I use it on I think Griffith's gnats or something. I think that's the only thing that I use it on. But hey, to each his own, right?
That's right. Yeah, peacock's a good material.
I made a fly one time for carp for the harbor. It's the first fly that I ever tried to quote unquote invent, which is very laughable. I'm glad you laughed. It was a weird looking fly. It was cool though, and it worked. I caught carp on it. The problem is it was so not durable. The thing would just fall apart after one fish. And it's not like carp have sharp teeth or anything.
Right.
So I stopped using that thing. But I do think that the peacock was it's that color thing you're talking about. That's just there's something magical about it.
True.
That's what the noob has to say, as if you guys care. Let's keep moving. Charles Reek 2. Strong name. Strong like blue cheese. Ew.
I love blue cheese. What's wrong with blue cheese? Come on.
He says, with all of your signature fly patterns, how do you decide what pattern, size, and bead weight to tie on starting the day? Good question there, Charles. Can we call you Chuck?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Chucky. Bead size to me is decided upon flow and depth, speed and depth of water I'm encountering. So that's something you can't really decide before you walk up to a particular stretch of water. As far as which patterns to tie on, that's again, and if you're using my flies, which you kind of referenced there with my signature patterns, many of them are more attractor than they are imitative. And so I don't think you have to necessarily, imitate something to be effective. I think in a lot of cases you can walk up and try and learn a little bit about the river. Is it freestone? Is it tailwater? Do you think the fish are mostly feeding on larger insects, or are they mostly, in a tailwater situation, would be the opposite of that, where they're mostly eating really small food items? And in that case, I would probably lean towards a smaller size fly, maybe a rainbow warrior, maybe a small iron lotus or silver bullet baetis, versus if they're eating something larger, maybe, or willing to, maybe a red dart or a GTI caddis or something like that, or using other patterns, something like a Tasmanian devil, blowtorch, Duracell, things like that. And so much of that just comes down to your confidence in the fly and the little bits that you can gather when you're learning about that particular fishery.
I want to add a little sub question to this to piggyback on his question. So, you park in the parking lot, you get your stuff together, and you start walking to the river. And I tend to look around and see what kind of bugs are in the air, or if there's grasshoppers in the grass while I'm approaching the river. But a lot of times I find that there's bugs that tend to hang around that outside area, and there's a whole different sort of ecosystem of bugs hanging around the water.
Terrestrials you're referencing, or?
I mean, not exclusively. I'm just saying it's you'll see you'll see bugs walking to the river. And then when you get to the river, you don't really see them as much anymore. Sometimes, not always, sometimes. So my question is basically, are you paying more attention when you get to the river than you are before, or are both important?
I would say both are important. I mean, sometimes if the parking area is near the river or the lake, you'll see midges, chironomids, mayflies, some, different insects that sometimes are gravitating to land on your vehicle, or they're buzzing around your head just because that's what's hatching. Maybe I took the approach of, I kind of took it from a nymphing perspective, I guess, not knowing much about the river, when he said, bead sizes and things like that. But we could talk a little bit about dry fly fishing too, which, to your point, if there's something around the river, whether that's mayflies, caddis, whatever, you might throw on something that's imitative of those things. And in case not, I would throw on like an ant, a bionic ant, or a hopper type pattern in the later summer months. I'm definitely always paying attention to what's in the grass and the bushes, especially the stuff right near the river. I guess if most of the time, if it's in the grass, 40 yards from the river, it's also in the grass 3 feet from the river, right? So it's going to end up in the river either way. But yeah, it's a good question. It's always hard to know exactly what to tie on without some prior experience. But there again, getting information wherever you can get it. The internet's a good tool, fly shop. And when all else fails, tie on whatever you're most confident in and start showing it to fishy water and see what happens.
Fair. That's a good point. All right, next. Favorite foam flies, and what do you like to fish on the dropper? And how you two prefer to rig and fish for them. Oh, I was included in this? Thank you. That was from Mike Bear.
Yeah, you too. TWO. Mikey B.
Well, you go first.
No. He included you. You got to go first on this one, and I'll follow up for once.
Okay, so, well, there's two things here. Because I don't fish in boats pretty much, I don't really need to get super long drifts. So I tend to not really fish foam flies. The other reason is because I usually carry 2 rods. So one's a nymph rod, one's a dry rod. So I don't fish dry dropper that often. I do sometimes, but not that often. Depends on the water type. I do it on slower water. If I had to pick one, the dry dropper is huge in the driftless. People just that's like their thing in the summer. Most people fish a hippie stomper with some sort of pink squirrel underneath it in the driftless area. That would be like the quintessential driftless setup. I like fishing grasshopper patterns, but I'm not obsessed with one particular pattern. So I think I'm not a good person to ask this question just because foam flies aren't super my jam. If I had to pick one, it would be Egan's bionic ant. That would probably be the one.
You're biased.
Very.
Just because I could see you on camera and I was threatening you?
No, because I just Googled it.
Oh, that's good. That's even better.
No, I didn't. As for the dropper, it really kind of depends where I'm fishing, but some of my favorite flies are, they're all sort of Euro style nymphs, the ones that I fish, but I make one that sort of looks like a midge. It's actually like a France fly is really what it is, but with a pink bead, black body. And then I like a lot of Lance's patterns, red dart, Frenchie, iron lotus. Yeah, I would say that's pretty much it. And as far as my rigging, I don't know. It depends on how deep the water is, but usually if I don't know how deep it is, and I'm walking to the river, I'll probably just rig 4 feet underneath the dry or the foam fly in this case, and then fish a tag, 2 flies, tag 18 inches up from the bottom fly. And then if I have to adjust once I get there, I will do that.
Nice. I'm with you. I think, favorite foam flies for me, bionic ant, bionic hopper, just a good old standard chubby Chernobyl. All good foam flies, easy to tie. Foam flies float well, great for dry dropper. Favorite droppers for me would be things, again, depends on where I'm going, but a thread Frenchie, standard Frenchie, red dart be a go-to dropper for me. Tungsten Surveyor or CDC Rainbow Warrior would be a couple of favorites as well, dropper-wise. As far as how to rig them, that varies a lot depending on how I'm fishing. I do like to fish a dry dropper on a Euro rig quite a bit when I'm wade fishing, and I tend to rig the dry fly on the tag that way rather than tying the dropper to the bend of the dry fly hook. So dry fly on a tag and the point fly being my dropper. When I'm fishing let's say from a drift boat, then I tend to fish a dry dropper there a couple ways. I guess it depends on whether I'm really expecting to get lots of fish on the dry or I'm just kind of using the dry for the occasional eat and more as an indicator. If the latter is true, then I will sometimes tie it to the bend of the hook. If I really think the fish are going to eat the dry quite a bit, then I will try to fish the dry on a tag. I'll just keep the tag relatively short so that it doesn't twist too much and doesn't hurt my ability to register strikes on the dropper. The longer you make that tag, kind of the less sensitive that can be at times. Otherwise, I mean, how do you rig it? Again, if you're throwing from a boat or you're just throwing a standard dry dropper rig on a weight forward fly line and what have you, then I would tend to go, 7.5 to maybe 9 or 10 foot tapered leader to the dry fly and then whatever size tippet you need from the dropper versus if I'm you're using the dry dropper on a Euro rig, then I would usually use a micro leader. So just straight 4X micro leader material. I use the Umpqua High Vis leader butt, usually in the green color, straight from my Euro fly line. So I put about 14 feet of that on there. And then a little bit of cider, a tippet ring, and the tippet to the dry fly, and then the tippet to the dropper.
Let's move on. Is it Red Ruger or Redrugger? I'm not sure.
I know not.
But he asked, or she asked, or they asked, do I really need 25 streamers or should 1 or 2 work in a variety of colors?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't think that you need 25 per se, but that's coming from a person that probably has 2,500 instead of 25.
Yeah.
But I'm always tinkering with them. Nobody needs that many streamers. I think your question is valid. Like most of the time, I think that getting the right color and the right depth and retrieve makes a bigger difference than exactly which streamer you throw. Mm-hmm. If you're throwing a beadhead bugger versus a conehead bugger, more or less the same thing, right? If you're throwing an unweighted bugger versus one of those other two, then that changes the presentation altogether. So you might have to find a different way to get your fly to depth. There's so many variables there that I guess usually when someone asks a question like this, they're like, I don't want to invest in a whole bunch of flies. What should I do? And I would say, I'm with you. Most people, that are starting in the sport especially don't have a lot of want or sometimes the means to, bury $500, $1,000 into a box full of streamers right out of the gates. Hardly anybody does that. So most people buy 3, 4, 5 patterns at a time and add to their collection. And over time, with a little experience, they start narrowing down their favorites. And there again, I think streamers, so much of the time, there are exceptions to this rule, but so much of the time, streamers are not really that imitative. I know we like to think that they are, but most of us looking at, a crawdad and then trying to make a crawdad pattern, or looking at a minnow and then adding feathers and deer hair and rubber legs and stupid things to a hook that look nothing like a minnow. And then in our minds, it looks like a minnow. And it could. Maybe the fish think it's a minnow. More often than not, I'm willing to bet that the fish aren't thinking about it at all, and they're just reacting to something that's swimming through their zone, and they want to either attack it or get it out of their area. Either way, I just don't think that the fly is that big of a difference maker most of the time. Again, the specific pattern. The colors can make a big difference with streamers. So I think you're best off to have a collection of colors first and foremost, and then adapt the weight of those and size of those streamers to where you think you'll use them most. And if you're fishing small streams, for instance, you don't need double articulated 5, 6, 7 inch long streamers. You need, small woolly buggers or leeches. And if you're throwing, to large tailwater somewhere where they have shad kills in a reservoir above it, or they have lots of minnows that get quite large, well, then those articulated streamers might have a place, right? Mm-hmm. Or you're fishing a place where they stock smallish trout and the larger trout like to eat the stocked smaller trout, then there again, a bigger streamer might be the ticket. If they're eating leeches and tiny little shiners or little chub minnows or something that's 2-3 inches long, then match the forage to that, or match your fly to that forage base size, and then just play with color. Again, we're coming back to basics, but I just think colors, depth, retrieve, those are bigger factors in streamers than having 2,000 of them in your box.
Okay, I'm going to piggyback on this question also. When we fish together, you let me take a picture of your fly box, which I will not be posting on the internet. But this was a few years before your commercial pattern, the Poacher, came out. And so I was looking at your jig streamers. This is when I was first trying to learn how to jig streamer. And One thing I noticed was that you had different color beads. So you had like a red colored bead. If I remember correctly, there was like a black colored bead, silver colored bead. Is there like a time when you decide, oh, this is a place I would use a red one? Or is it more, no one's taking this black colored bead, so I'll switch to red to see if it works?
It's more the latter, and or I'm always tinkering with flies. I'm always messing. Like, I guess the thing that you pointed out there is I have a fly out now called the poacher, which is a small little sculpin imitation, let's say, right? And I fished it for many years before coming out, before it was available commercially, if that makes sense. And so I'm tinkering with bead colors and colors of dubbings and weights and sizes and things to get it just the way I want it for most people to find, for when it's available to buy, for most of our customers to have the most success on it, if that makes sense. So in that process, I'll tie the same fly with matte black beads with, old olive or, like a metallic olive bead, a mottled bead, a silver bead, a gold bead, a copper bead, and on and on and on. And whatever I think is most productive in most situations. In that case, in the olive poacher's case, a black nickel bead was kind of the one that I found was best in almost all situations. But that said, there's always a time for some contrast. So that's where like the red bead or maybe silver, or you could even tie something with a bright chartreuse bead or orange bead to mix it up a little bit. So there's always a few of those outliers in my boxes, but I don't have a real easy answer for you on when you should tie one on versus the other. But that particular pattern, black nickel, is the one I settled on commercially, and I always have a few outliers in the box. Can we do a timeout, a Traeger timeout?
Do it. I'm gonna order food then.
1 minute. Sorry.
No worries.
What did you order?
Shandu Impressions dried chili chicken. It's so good. It's insane.
To die for.
It's just like MSG heaven. It's crazy.
Glub.
Yeah, exactly. I shouldn't have done it because it's starting to become like a weekly ritual. But my wife cooked all this food for me.
Yeah.
But I was kind of like, that sounds so good.
Tonight I'm doing it.
They use these, the Szechuan peppercorn. Have you ever had that before? It like numbs your mouth. It's incredible. It's like spicy in a completely different way. And it like numbs your mouth when you eat it. It's really interesting. It's really good. It kind of has like, almost like a star anise slight flavor, but not quite that strong. It's really good. All right, that concludes the fly section of the Q&A. Let's move on to lines now. Fish_flies_matter and 2HS. I'm not sure. It's been copied into this in a strange manner, so forgive us.
Two-handers maybe? Two-handed rod? I don't know.
This person asks, what is your preference on whether or not line sizes should change back to grain size like they used to be? I've noticed that some manufacturers' packaging reflects grain size. While not everyone is accustomed to this, I personally would prefer it. Also, from a sales perspective, do you think it would be more or less difficult, better or worse? In my opinion, I see it being more informative/educational for a customer. What are your thoughts?
I'm a little confused. I don't know what they mean by like they used to be. They didn't used to be in grains. They've always been in grains. Or before they were in 5-weight, 6-weight, they were in letters. So, you could get it was a letter denomination, not a number denomination. But almost all of my lifetime, they've been, 3-weight, 4-weight, 5-weight, 0-weight, 12-weight, whatever. And that specifically relates to grain weight. So what a 5-weight means is that it's 140 grains. So it's using both of those scales all in one. So I'm not really sure what they're talking about. If manufacturers went straight grain weight instead of fly line weight, I think it would be more confusing for people because it's harder for most people to remember grain weights. I mean, I've worked in the industry a very long time, and I can count on one hand like the number of people that I know that I interact with on a regular basis that could tell you the grain weights of like even just standard like 3-weight through 8-weight fly lines, let's say, off the top of their head. Some of them can, and there are certainly industry professionals that know that inside and out, but most people don't memorize that. It's not that hard. It's pretty simple stuff, but it's easier to remember a single digit, 5-weight, 6-weight, 7-weight.
Well, because that's the name of the rod, right? It's not like the rod is a 250 grain rod. Right.
Yeah, it could be. It is one and the same. Like, an 8-weight line is a 210 grain line and a standard fly line weight, give or take 7 grains. So if you said this is a 210 grain line, we could also say that's an 8-weight rod, right? It's a 210 grain rod. It's an 8-weight. But I think it'd be more confusing for people. I can tell you from selling lines for a long time that most people have a hard time remembering what their one rod they own is. We get people every day. I need a new fly line. Okay, cool. What weight's your rod? Oh, I have no idea. Okay, do you have it with you in the car, or how can I help you? We can take a stab at it, or you could come back another day with that information.
That's pretty funny.
Take an educated guess. Anyway, so I think it would definitely be more confusing that way. What maybe they're referring to is lots of fly lines are these days from all manufacturers are made overweighted. So you buy a 5-weight, whether you buy a Rio, a Cortland, a Scientific Anglers, an Airflow, it doesn't matter which brand you buy. They have offerings that are true to weight, and they have offerings that are like half a line heavy or a full line heavy. And they all say that on the box, and they all basically will tell you, if they don't tell you on the box, almost all of them do, but if for the rare exception that they don't tell you the grain weight also on the box, you could just reference their website and get that information very easily.
Okay.
So I would not suggest that they go away from the fly line designation personally.
Yeah, I don't know any of the grain weights of my things. I do like to pay attention to grain weights. I don't have them memorized, but to me, where the grain weight becomes important is actually when you're overweighting the line. That's where I'm like, oh, how much more do I want to overweight this rod?
Right.
Or whatever. But,
right.
So I think I'm kind of with you. Good question, though. Interesting. I've never thought about that.
The Scientific Anglers segment.
We're back in the essay saddle, as we love to be. Let's have a little conversation about something that I think often a lot of newer anglers get confused. I know I certainly did. When I first got a couple of my setups, I was like, I just want to use one or two things and have this like sort of utilitarian methodology behind my gear. One example that I could use is like my 8-weight. I wanted to get an 8-weight so I could fish in South Carolina, like surf fishing. And then I was like, oh, that'll be really good if I try and do salmon and steelhead here in the Midwest, the famous Salmo steelhead.
Steelhead salmon.
If you ever heard of it. So I was like, yeah, I'll just get one set up. And then quickly I figured out that there's tropical lines, cold water lines, warm water lines, and all these different lines in between. So maybe you can walk us through about what's the difference between a tropical or warm water line and a more cold water centric line, and why you can't really use each of those exclusively in one of the temperature areas, temperate zones, regions, question mark.
Depending on your location. Yeah, so we can definitely talk about that. So SA makes a bunch of different fly lines, right? It's so many, and then this isn't limited to them, but every fly line manufacturer makes so many that sometimes people get a little overwhelmed, but it doesn't really need to be overwhelming. It can be pretty basic. So just at a high level, they make tropical and cold water fly lines because there's a distinct performance difference between the two. So what would be the differences? The biggest differences would be the coatings and the core of the fly lines. They could also have differences in the taper designs. So if we go back to the coatings and core, most of the tropical fly lines have a braided monofilament core that offers a bit more stiffness. They have a bit less stretch. So think of like you're in a tropical environment, whether you're wading a flat that's, relatively warm water, warmer than you'd find on a trout stream, let's say, or a trout lake, or you're casting from the deck of a flat skiff and the sun's beating down on, it's 80 plus degrees outside. It's sunny, it's warm, and the boat deck is really warm. And you have a fly line that's designed to handle, 60-degree temps in cold Alaska. That line's going to get gummy. It's not going to shoot through the guides very well. It's going to be too supple, too soft, so it won't have enough stiffness to push and carry through the guides. On the flip side of that, you could have a tropical coating paired with that more stiff braided monofilament type of core that offers some stiffness, offers some resistance to that warm boat deck and the warm water, and it will push through the guides. It will stay slick, have the right mix of suppleness versus stiffness to allow you to carry a fly and deliver it efficiently to the fish you're trying to chase. On the flip side, if you take that, tropical fly line to a cold water environment, you're going to have a slinky on your hands. It's just going to coil too much. In that case, we would change the core of the line to more of a hollow core that's more of a braided multi-filament core that is softer and more supple, is not as affected by the cooler temps, and you can also adapt the coating of the fly line for those different that temperature range also. So there's all kinds of differences in them. And then if you take it one step further and start looking at taper designs, so saltwater tapers are generally designed for quick shooting, quick loading type of casts. A lot of saltwater fishing is sight fishing, think flats fishing from tropical environments, where you might spot a fish and you need to be able to execute a cast quite quickly and with as efficient as possible, but also as accurately as possible. So a little bit more compact head design, so you don't have to false cast as much, but you can deliver a fly quickly. On the flip side, if you're looking for something with a more delicate presentation, like in not all, but many more cold water environments, making a longer headline or something that is not quite as powerful of delivery might be an advantage, in trout fishing, certainly. But you could also have a freshwater, cold water type of line that's quite aggressive and will turn over a big heavy streamer or a heavy nymph rig or any sort of technique specific things that you need it to do.
For me, the biggest takeaway just hearing you say that is if you want to play a really mean joke on your friends, you take a tropical line and you put it on their cold water rig, and then you guys go out fishing and you laugh.
You just watch them struggle. That would be mean.
Just coiling the whole time.
Yes. Yeah, you want to have the right line for the job, right? And as we talk about fly lines from Scientific Anglers, obviously your local shop, if you're hitting us up at Fly Fish Food, wherever you're buying your fly lines, of course, we're happy to sell you a fly line. And some people, when they hear these types of things, they think it's a sales pitch and you're just trying to sell them something. But honestly, we're only trying to get you, what you really need for that particular outing. I'm never trying to force a fly line on somebody. I'm just trying to make sure they have the right tool for the application they need. Fly lines are crazy cool. They're really fun to mess with. They're fun to make sure you have the right tool for the job. And they make a fly line these days for just about everything.
After 80 years of innovation, I would hope so.
They've got it dialed.
All right, so now let's go on to leaders. Since you're a leader in your field, let's talk about leaders, Lance. Hi, Lance. Question. Multiple nymph rig. Is foul hooking avoidable with technique and discipline in some way? If so, any tips? Or is this just part of our blood sport that sometimes this is going to happen? Thanks, dude. Cole_Albanese.
I think that it is part of our sport. It should be a very small part of our sport. You're running a hook around where fish live. You're going to foul hook one now and then. Now, that said, if you're doing it frequently, then yeah, there's some things that need to be fixed here. Number one, putting distance between your flies will dramatically decrease your foul hooking. And just instead of having flies like 10, 12 inches apart, 15 inches apart, try them 20, 24 inches apart. That will change that you're not nearly as likely to foul hook fish then. And the other thing that will change that a lot is learning to register strikes better. So whether you're Euro nymphing or you're indicator nymphing, or you are stripping streamers, two streamers on a tandem rig or something like that, no matter how you're fishing, if you're not in really good contact and you're late on a hook set, the fish will take your first fly in, eject it in a heartbeat before you ever get tight. And by the time you register the strike, you're setting the hook, and maybe your second fly is kind of right near them, and it happens to get them in the side or in the tail or what have you. Yeah. So learning to register strikes that will help really lessen the amount of foul hooking for sure. One other hack that spacing your flies out also helps with is when you put flies really close together and then you land them in a net and the fish rolls in the net, both flies can get all tangled in them. And again, by having them 20, 24 inches apart or more, you can have one fly in the net and one fly totally out of the net and not have that happen at all.
Cool. Yes. Great answer. Great question. Let's roll. Okay. Next up. Matthew B.
Matty B.
I have some questions about long dry fly leaders, 18 feet plus. I understand that we don't want the leader to straighten out fully, but if you could explain the balance between maintaining the right amount of slack while landing with accuracy and how much fly line is out of the guides to carry it. 3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah, so tough to answer that one clearly as far as the fly line amount. Fly line amount is dictated on how far away you need to fish, right? Mm-hmm. Usually with a leader that long, you need some fly line out or it'd be really difficult to turn it over at all, have any control of it at all. As far as the balance being struck between slack and the leader, too much, not enough, they are right in that you don't generally want your leader to straighten with a dry fly presentation with those long leaders. What I find the most success is doing what I refer to as hooks. It's the leader goes out and hooks right or hooks left depending on the situation, and then the other option is a nice pile of the tippet to get drag-free drifts. In all scenarios, you need to add enough of a hook or enough of a pile. You need to add enough slack, if you will, to allow the fly to drift drag-free long enough to be in the strike zone of the trout you're targeting or the water type that you're targeting. As far as accuracy goes, it seems like it would be really difficult to be accurate with a leader that long period, and it is. And it's even more difficult, I would argue, to be accurate and be very adept at adding accuracy with the piles and the hooks in your leader. That's just something that's going to come with time. It's something I'm personally still trying to master. I would call myself a intermediate level angler regarding that type of fishing based on some of the people that I've seen do it at more of an expert level. I'm definitely not there. I'm getting there. I'm working on it, but I'm better than I was a year ago, and I hope to be better still in another year. But it's very difficult to throw a leader that long and have pinpoint accuracy and avoid overhanging brush and be, 3 inches from the bank or into a narrow seam or pocket with that length of leader while maintaining that slack. So practice makes perfect, and keep at it, and know that nobody masters that in 2 or 3 months. That's a long process.
One question about that though. So if you're introducing this hook, which I used to do not on purpose, I corrected that, but I kind of know how to do it now. Well, I can only get it to go to the right. I can't get it to go to the left yet. Still working on that.
You're not an ambi turner.
No, I'm not. But my question is, it seems like that would, if you fished that way, you would have to place your line and leader in one current, and maybe your fly would be in a different one. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, it depends on how big the seams are, right? How big of an area you're trying to fish. But yeah, a lot of times that's the case. You have your fly and your hook of your tippet is in one current speed, and the rest of your leader is in a separate current speed, usually faster. That's the purpose for the hook, is that you're introducing slack that has to be absorbed before the fly starts getting drag to it. For me, I underpower the cast. So when the dry fly is unrolling, if I'm hooking it to the right, I'm changing the angle of my cast slightly. I'm angling the rod away from my body slightly and underpowering the cast so that as it lands, the loop, instead of the top leg of the loop coming over the top of the bottom leg of the loop, the top leg comes to the side.
Oh, interesting.
And instead of turning over, it just kind of lands and dies with that hook already built in.
That's cool.
And the same would be true in the opposite direction on the left, right?
Right. That makes sense. So then, yeah, if you do that in this scenario you just mentioned, where the seam is faster where you're landing and where the fly is, it's slower water, I'm assuming that your drifts would be kind of short, right?
Yeah, they're going to be generally very short, especially depends on how broken the water is, right? The more consistent the currents are, then the longer your drifts will be, and the less consistent, the more conflicting currents you have, the shorter your drifts will be, for sure.
Okay, cool. Very interesting. Lovely question. Thank you for asking that, Matthew.
Lovely that.
Next up is Chachiaviret. 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 Yeah, I don't know how to say it.
I think you might have failed.
I'm trying to see if it's in a certain romantic language, but I can't tell. In Italian, a vowel followed by a consonant is pronounced like a CH. So I was trying to make that work, but it's not working. So, what's your favorite beginner rod setup? How does mono and fluoro tippet / leaders affect fly presentation? Oh, there's a lot built in that question for Lance here.
So what is my favorite beginner rod setup? I don't know that I have a specific favorite. I would say popular models that we sell. There's there's the Echo Lift Kit is a very popular model. The Orvis Encounter, the Orvis Clearwater, the Reddington Field Kits. What else? There's a new one from Cortland. I wish I could remember the name, but it looks really good. I like the rod and the reel look very high quality for the amount of money they're asking for it. There's a bunch of them that are just entry level rod reel line combos, let's say 4 or 5, 6 or 8 weights, depending on what you're going to do with them. Or if you didn't want to buy a pre-made package, then I would look at options from Reddington, from Echo, from Temple Fork Outfitters, the lower end Orvis options. I'm missing some companies.
Guide Freshwater Outfit.
That's the Cortland?
Guide Freshwater Outfit.
And how much do they retail for?
$219.95. Sold to bidder number 3. Yeah, they do look nice.
That's the one, yeah. Guide Freshwater Outfit from Cortland. Yeah, they come in like 5s and 6s and 8 weights. Yeah, and like 209 to 220, depending on the weight. That's been a good one as well. Fresh new option. Almost everybody makes really a pretty respectable rod reel line combo, regardless of brand. I would caution people away from the, if you're finding like a hardware store $49.95 fly fishing rod special, that's probably not, you're going to be really frustrated with it. I would get one from one of those known brands and expect to pay, $199, $200, $250 on the inexpensive end of things. And if you're looking for more of a more mid-priced starter outfit, you have a little more to invest in it. You maybe want to grow into it longer, maybe the Sage Foundation. I forgot Lamson also. Lamson now has some really cool rod and reel outfits, some that come with line, some that come without line, so you can choose the line. They're very good quality for the price. Again, lots of them. I don't personally have a favorite. I don't think you could go wrong with any of those brands we've mentioned.
Cool.
And then the second part of that question was, how do mono and fluoro tippet leaders affect presentation? So they mean nylon and fluoro, not mono, because nylon and fluoro are both monofilament. We've covered this before, but
we have covered that before
many times. But nylon and fluorocarbon tippets can affect fly presentation in several ways. I personally, again, we've covered this on the podcast, but just for the sake of answering the question, I use just basically strictly fluorocarbon tippet for everything, dry flies, nymphing, streamers, all of it. It works great. I do not suggest using full fluorocarbon leaders for dry fly fishing because the butt material of a fluorocarbon leader is dense enough that it will push through the surface tension a little easier than nylon will, and can cause a little bit more pop on your fly when you go to pull a dry fly off the water instead of your nylon leader sitting high and dry, especially if you add a little float into it. The fluorocarbon tends to sit in the surface a little bit more. Other parts to that question. So I guess for me, just to make things simple, I just use fluorocarbon tippet for everything. Nylon will work in many situations. I'm just not willing to carry fluorocarbon and nylon tippet in all the sizes that I think I would want. So I just decide on one, and fluorocarbon's the one for me. That may not be the case for you. Leader-wise, I do almost all my river fishing with floating lines with nylon leaders and then just add fluorocarbon tippet to them. And I do almost all of my sinking fly line tactics with 100% fluorocarbon leaders. The reason for that is density and clarity, abrasion resistance. Fluorocarbon is, generally speaking, more abrasion resistant than nylon. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how they can affect your fly presentation. If you're nymphing or you want to get stuff down, fluorocarbon is minutely more dense, so it will allow a beaded fly, let's say, or a weighted streamer to pull your tippet through the water column a little tiny bit easier than nylon tippet or leader material would. On the flip side, again, dry flies, you don't want a full fluorocarbon leader for dry fly fishing. Could you catch fish with it? Yes, but it's not making things as easy as they could be, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, let's move on. The next leader question is from T_Dilworth801. What are the best trout spay lines for throwing bigger flies?
That is a good question. It's one that I don't know the answer to because I don't do any trout spay. For throwing larger flies, I would suggest in trout spay, your rod's usually going to give you a grain weight range. This rod takes in trout spay, I don't know enough about the grain weights to say off the top of my head, but I would guess somewhere in let's say you're throwing a 250 to 300 grain line, just for the sake of talking about it. Just keep in mind that the heavier grain weight it's heavier weight, so it carries more weight with it with greater ease, just like a standard fly line would. So for throwing larger streamers, I think you'd find an aggressive head, a more shorter tapered head will throw a bigger fly with greater ease. Shorter front taper and more grain weight will make that easier.
Okay.
That said, I would consult somebody that's truly an expert on trout spay because that is not me. I don't have a single trout spay rod. I'm not saying people shouldn't do it. It's just not something, I'm not trying to belittle it. It's just not something that I've gotten into. So I don't know very much about it.
Okay. Sounds good. Last question in the leader section from Pablo S. Signori. I think we've heard of that guy again, too. What knot would you use for attaching wire tippet?
To the fly?
No, leader to wire.
An Albright or a Huffnagel would be my first two choices.
Right, you said that before. Huffnagel, I forgot about that.
Huffnagel is the easiest. I don't think it's as strong as I'm sure actually that it's not as strong as an Albright, but it's easier to tie, quicker to tie. So if you're using material that you're not terribly worried about, if you have leader that like your Dorado fishing is what I suppose you're likely to do next, right?
Yeah.
So if you're using straight 40-pound fluorocarbon or what have you, leader material, you're not really in jeopardy of that breaking.
Fair.
Not very easily. You're in jeopardy of the fish cutting through it, but you're not in jeopardy of it breaking very easily. So I would tie a Huffnagel that confidently and not worry about it, because even if you lost a few percentage, breaking strength, a little bit of that breaking strength goes away, you're still okay just for the ease of tying the Huffnagel. But if you're chasing IGFA records and you wanted, you're fishing ultra light leader for the species you're targeting, I would go as strong of a knot as you can, right?
Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to the next section here. Your favorite one, casting.
Casting.
Ironically, there's only one question in the casting section.
That's not ironic at all.
And this one comes from Ashley. Thank you, Ashley, for being the winner of the only casting question in the bunch. It's a good question. Casting progression. My question, if you could design a step-by-step program for someone who has just started fly fishing with an emphasis on progressing your casting abilities, what would that look like? What free resources could you recommend? When would paying for a casting instructor make sense? And what other aspects of fishing can have an impact on your casting, i.e. type of rod, fly lines, flies, water you're fishing? I mean, this is kind of broad.
Yeah.
I promise I have listened when we've talked about casting on land, and practice is what's going to make you better. It just feels like once you start fishing, there is a pressure to progress quickly and being able to single and double haul almost before you have the basic technique down. My boyfriend says it's because I'm still focused on understanding the proper technique for casting, and so the mechanism of performing a haul doesn't make a lot of sense to me yet.
Yeah. All good stuff. So I know Ashley, she worked in the shop for a short period of time. She sent me that message. It's fairly long, and I'll probably have to respond to her individually on some of those topics. But I mean, if I could handpick, I would do what she's talking about. I would start with basics, get the basic 10 and 2 down. I would learn how to load a rod, learn how to have a little bit of control, learn tracking of the rod. So you're not, moving out of a single plane, moving the rod back and forth in a straight line path, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
After that, if you have basics dialed in, then we can start talking about introducing casts like curve cast, serpent cast, reach cast, some fishing casts, if you will. And if you want to get further down that road, then we would start talking about single or double haul. I would suggest don't mess with a single haul. If you're going to learn how to haul, you might as well learn how to double haul.
Sure.
Right? Some of those questions, like when would you look at getting a casting instructor? I would say anytime. I mean, at any point in your casting career, I think ideally most people should try it. Get a little casting under your belt first before getting an instructor, just to maximize your experience with and maximize your time and efficiency with the instructor. But knowing Ashley, knowing how much she fishes, I would suggest that she could get an instructor anytime, and it would benefit her and give her some things to think about for sure. Not to say that she's not a good caster, because she is, but she's doing the right thing here and is eager to learn and get better, right? And improve, which we all should do. I'm trying to think of other parts of that question that I didn't get to.
Free resources you could recommend. I could recommend one.
Yes. Perfect. Please do.
Mad River Outfitters has a video with Tim Rajeff about tracking. That's very good.
Perfect. Tim knows a thing or two about fly casting.
Yeah, that was a good one. And it made me pay a lot more attention to it, which was helpful. The other thing that I would say that I think is so underrated, and it's crazy how helpful it is filming yourself cast. Because most people, when they're casting, they think they're doing 10 and 2, and they're actually doing like 9 and 3.
Right.
So I think if you film yourself in the park or at like some casting pier or maybe on a pond or something, you will be shocked at what you see, and it will get you tight a lot faster. I feel like that leveled me up when I was practicing a lot, and especially in the beginning. I would film myself with my iPhone in slow motion, and I could really pick apart what I was doing and see if I was like creeping or my stop points were too wide, or if I was like lifting the rod a little bit on the back cast, just like random things like that. I think that's a really good tool that is underutilized.
Agreed. Other free resources would be, so Orvis puts out some pretty cool fly casting videos in their learning center. Pete Kutzer does most of their stuff, and he has really good descriptions and easy to follow videos. There's also a series that's on YouTube that's called Fly Fusion Cast Like a Pro series. I think we've referenced it in our previous podcast too, but it's Bruce Richards and Jeff Wagner. Jeff's a very accomplished caster and currently I think is like the CEO or something of the Mayfly Group. They own like Able Reels, Ross Reels, Dynaking and Renzetti Vices and Airflow fly lines, a whole bunch of different fly fishing companies are all under one umbrella. He's I can't remember if he's a CEO, but I maybe didn't give him the right title, but he's a higher up there for sure. I've known him for a long time. He's been in the industry a long time. He's a very good caster, and he's also a long time casting instructor. He's put one of the guys that are the talent in there, and the other one is Bruce Richards, who is also long time casting instructor and also was for I want to say around 30 plus, maybe even 40 years, the line designer at Scientific Anglers. So he knows a thing or two about fly casting and tapers of lines and all that. He knows a lot more than a thing or two about those sorts of things. I used to trade fun emails with him back and forth with questions, and he's always got good perspectives on fly lines and casting and that sort of thing. So that Fly Fusion Cast Like a Pro series is just on YouTube. I think that they have several episodes of it. I don't know exactly how many, but off the top of my head, but there's lots of them, so you could reference different parts of the cast. But there's all kinds of good free instruction online. But again, there's no substitute for casting, just going in the park and casting.
Yeah, I also think if you're a really, really, really green noob, Orvis has a free, it's like Fly Fishing 101 class, which is very helpful if you're just getting into the sport. Probably most of the people listening to this have already gotten past that because this is season 4. But if you haven't, it's a great place to start and sort of get your head around the concepts of casting and even just flies and how the whole spiel works in concert.
Cool.
I started there. So
yeah, that's a great place to start for sure.
And then I ended up teaching a few of the classes with my buddy Ray Blay from season 1.
Oh man.
Old school.
Good old Ray.
All right, so let's move on to the nymphing section. From your recent post, how can I know my flies are getting deep enough when I'm indicator nymphing? And is fishing Euro nymphs under an indicator effective or a bad idea? Geo. Sick name, Geo.
Yes, that's a cool name. Euro nymphs are definitely effective under an indicator, no doubt about it. They're just flies that fish like to eat, so definitely not limited to a Euro rig. Good under a dry fly, good under an indicator, etc., etc. As far as how to know when your nymphs are getting the proper depth, when you're fishing an indicator rig, the indicator should, slow down a little bit because the surface is going faster than the river part of the river column. The water column that you want to target when you're nymphing is down deeper and moving slightly slower. So you'd want your indicator to slow down a little bit, and that's usually caused by either the flies or ideally on most indicator setups, you have split shot involved, and you would have split shot ticking bottom now and then. That would let you know that your flies are down in the zone. It doesn't have to be dragging bottom constantly. It's just kind of hitting, drifting. You need to know that you're down in that bottom layer of water. Outside of that, how else you could tell with an indicator? I mean, if you're getting some eats, you're down there. If you're never getting strikes, that's a pretty telltale sign that you're not getting the proper depth. And if you're never contacting bottom with flies or weight, you're definitely not getting to the proper depth. So use the river bottom as kind of your resource of knowing if you're snagging too much or if the flies or split shot are dragging constantly, you're down too much and going too slow. And if it's just ticking intermittently, that's probably perfect.
Yeah, and I was going to add, if you're into indicator nymphing, I think George Daniel in his last book talked about using a New Zealand strike indicator. It kind of looks like the head of those like troll dolls.
Yeah.
It's just, wool that's colored, but what you can do is you can shape it in a way that's kind of tall, and then depending on which way it tips or rocks, you can sort of tell where your nymph is. So if your nymph is in front of the indicator will tip backwards. And if it's behind, it'll tip slightly forwards. So that could also help you sort of gauge how deep you are. It's more sort of granular, but could be something to think about.
Yeah, it may be. Maybe it doesn't tell you depth really well, but it tells you where the flies are as far as whether they're ahead of the current of your indicator or behind in the current of your indicator. And that can be telling if you learn to read that, because generally if your flies are downstream, further downstream than your indicator, then they're moving really fast and they're not slowing down enough, right? They're not getting to depth for sure.
Good question.
I like it. And that's a good question. And I like your call out there too. George has several books out. All of them are worth the read. Streamers, nymphing, all kinds of good stuff. Our buddy George Daniel, if you don't have some of his books or all of his books and you're eager to learn more about fly fishing, you should check them out. Good resources for sure.
Yeah, they're really good. And they have good pictures. My only complaint about George's books, though, is that they're so big, I can't take them on vacation with me. I wish he would just make like a little paperback version for me. George, if you're listening,
well, maybe he needs an ebook.
Something like that would be helpful. All right. So next, Jaron W. Pulver. What techniques can you do in casting a Euro rod to get to tight spots and under bushes and trees? Also, when do you swap to a new fly to find out what they're hitting versus adding, subtracting weight?
When do I swap to a new fly? I'm going to get those in reverse. The when to swap to a new fly is whenever you feel like it. I mean, if you're not getting down, you got to add a different fly for different weight. If you're trying different patterns, I'm almost always nymphing with 2 flies. There are exceptions to that rule, but most of the time, if I'm Euro nymphing, I have 2 nymphs on. And if I'm doing almost all of my damage on one of those 2 nymphs, then I keep changing the other fly until I start doing damage on both of them. If you're only catching on one or the other, something's not right. You want to get both of those dialed in. So I would continue changing lots and lots of times. You can also mess with where on the leader you put them. If you're catching all the fish on the point fly, you can move it to the top dropper and figure out real quick, is it just that fly is getting deeper, or is it that they just love that fly? Because if they keep eating it and it's not as heavy or whatever, or it's on the top dropper, it's higher in the column, it's probably just they love that fly, they love that color, they love that silhouette. So find something else that's similar, or in some cases, just fish 2 of the same flies. One a little heavier than the other. It's hard to know, without being on the river and know what's going on, when to change flies, but anytime that you're not very confident what you have on, you fished it for a while, I would give it a change, fly changing. I think most people either change flies too much or not enough, and very rarely they strike that happy medium. It's easy for me to say, right? Sitting here behind the computer, but we talk to people that in the shop that change flies like crazy and don't really ever focus on getting a good presentation. I think that's a mistake. And then we get people that just tie on their favorite fly and don't ever change it and expect it to work. And I think both those extremes are, like in most things in the world, extremes are usually not good. There's a balance to be found in the middle of those two. What was the first part of his question? I forgot already.
What techniques can you do in casting a Euro rod to get to tight spots and under bushes and trees? So
that's a good one, Jaron. So just having command of the cast is that's the first thing you need to get, which just comes with practice. One of the things I like about a Euro rig is that it's much less clumsy to cast. Speaking about nymphing rigs specifically, it's more clumsy than, say, a dry fly, I would argue, but it's a single dry. But comparing a Euro rig to an indicator rig with a strike indicator, split shot, and flies, with all those different densities and pivot points on the leader, that's a really clunky rig to be pinpoint accurate with. So the Euro rig allows itself to be cast into much more narrow seams to avoid overhanging bushes, to be tight to banks. But to do all of that, you have to have command of the cast. You got to be able to direct it. So just practice. When you really want to be accurate, I would go down to a single fly. It's easiest to be accurate with just that one weight point on your leader rather than 2 different weights. What else? When you want to come underneath things instead of lobbing, I see beginner Euro nymphers just tend to lob flies out there, and more advanced casters will carry more loop shapes and be able to direct a cast around their body instead of just up over the top into the air. They'll go more parallel to the water surface for parts of the cast to avoid overhanging bushes or trees and things like that. Again, it's going to come down to your practice and time spent with the rig, and then there's also some casting learning that can be done. So I'll give you modernymphingmasterclass.com would be my my shameless plug for the video series that we've mentioned many times on here, but that has hours of casting instruction on it. Most people probably skip it because it's probably the most boring part of the whole thing because there's not very many fish being caught.
I disagree.
But it's very helpful. And as we've talked 1,000 times on this podcast, I'm exaggerating a bit, but maybe only 900 times, casting is something that I believe limits people's ability to catch fish big time in fly fishing.
Yeah, I agree.
Their lack of casting ability.
The one thing I'll add is your homie Devin Olson just came out with a video not too long ago about casting a Euro rig, some tips and tricks. Devin Olson from Tactical Fly Fisher, and it was really helpful for me.
Cool.
I watched it when it came out. I watched it again today before I went to the casting pier, and I made a point to sort of implement some of the concepts that he was introducing. It definitely made me level up. So
all right,
if that's something that you're trying to, especially with the question getting into like tight spots, I think he really breaks down like what he sees people do that's not good, and then he shows you what is good, and it's pretty solid. So that would be another thing.
Awesome.
All right, let's get to the last question of the day. Remember, this is a 2-part series. We'll be coming back with part 2 in the following podcast. So this will close out part 1 of the Q&A here in season 4. Nuts to think about. This one's by Rye White. Any tips to avoid leaving 5 to 6 feet of fluorocarbon in the river when Euro nymphing? Sometimes you can't free a snag or wait it close enough to grab the tippet, and it breaks at the tippet ring rather than the fly. I feel bad leaving those lengths of everlasting tippet in the river. Also, seems questionable to try and make the fly knot weaker at the tippet ring knot, but maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, I'm with you. We don't want to leave any extra tippet out there, regardless of technique. And Euro nymphing is one of many that would leave it, and you can find that same thing to be true with dry flies, with streamers, and on and on. So yeah, we don't want to leave tippet out there. So the first thing that comes to mind when I read this question is I would get new tippet rings. Not all tippet rings are created equal. I wish that they were, but we sell brands of them that I have had really bad success with, and we sell them still because some people have had good success with them. I'm not sure how, but they have. But I don't want to throw any brands under the bus, but if you're having trouble with a particular brand of tippet ring breaking it, the tippet, that connection, you got to just get new rings. There are some rings that are significantly smoother than others. Next up, I would suggest changing your knot. So assuming you have good tippet rings, then add a knot to the tippet ring that is very, very strong. I like a uni knot, usually a 4 or 5 turn uni knot to the tippet ring. It's significantly stronger than a clinch. If you're really concerned about it, you could also cut the sider from the leader and do a Palomar. You'd have to pass the sider and the tippet ring through the loop is why you'd have to cut it from your leader, or you'd have to pass your whole fly rod and reel through the loop. That's not going to happen. So, or I guess it could happen. It's a very inefficient way to tie the knot. So if you're really worried about strength, the Palomar knot would be a very good doubled knot or a trilene knot that goes through the tippet ring twice. All of those knots are only as good as the tippet ring. So some tippet rings have sharp edges on them, and that just, it doesn't matter what knot you tie then. To list some brands, I won't list some that I've had bad success with, but those that I've had good success with specifically are Hannock and Cortland. Their tippet rings for me have been very good. And then Umpqua makes a very good tippet ring as well. It's on the more expensive end of things, but it's a German quality still that's polished and a very good tippet ring also. So that's number 1. Number 2 basically comes back to number 1. If you're snagging on the bottom and it's not breaking at your triple surgeons or at your fly knot, and it's always breaking your tippet, we're back to your tippet ring being an issue again. That is the problem in most cases because there are very few knots to flies, especially after fishing them for a few minutes where you've got abrasion on the tippet right near the fly and or the tippet to fly knot or the triple surgeons or whatever knot you're using to create your droppers is almost always weaker or should be weaker than whatever you're connecting to the tippet ring. So I think if that's a common problem for you, again, this is going to happen to everybody once in a while. You're going to tie a bad knot or you're going to get a nick in your tippet or whatever. Everybody's going to break off once in a while. You're nymphing near the bottom. You're going to be contacting the bottom. You're going to snag the bottom once in a while. But if it's happening routinely, you need to just get new tippet rings. Throw the old ones out, get some smoother, better.
The one thing I will add, which is a little plug for something that someone sent me to try out. It's called Fetch a Fly. The guy who made this sent this to me to try out. And, full disclosure, I haven't really tried it out on the river that much because it's kind of heavy and I don't want to take it with me. But I think the idea is really cool. And I've used it to grab things all over my studio, like cables behind the desk and stuff like that. And it just seems to be this practical little thing. It's telescopic. It has like a little hook at the end of it, and you can keep it in your pack. So if you want to try that, that would be another thing that you could try to loosen up the flies that get snagged.
Dislodge the fly. Yeah, I like it.
My only gripe is that it's kind of heavy, but I think the reason it's heavy is because when you're in a raging river, you kind of need something with a little bit of stoutness. Otherwise, it'll just get blown away,
Yeah, I like it. Fetch a fly. Fetch -a-fly, right? Fetch -a-fly.
Yes, sir.
One other thing I would add is I'm constantly amazed as I teach classes and things how often people don't really think through a snag. Like they get snagged on the bottom of the river and they just keep pulling straight downstream. And if you give them a simple explanation of the current's going from left to right, your flies went into whatever they're stuck in left to right. If you pull them only in the right, you're digging the hook deeper into whatever it's hooked on.
Yeah.
Change your angle, weigh it around, strip down on your line, get a different leverage and a different angle point, and pull the flies back upstream. I know that sounds simple, and the person that asked this question, I'm sure, is trying that, of course. But just as an extra tip, I would say, having guided hundreds of anglers over the last who knows how long, I would say, I'm just shooting from the hip here, but I would bet more than like 80%, maybe 90% of the snags that we get on the bottom come out. If you just move the rod upstream and change your angle. Maybe you have to wade upstream a little bit too sometimes, but most of them will come out if you just pull them the correct direction rather than pulling tighter into whatever you're snagged on.
I agree, especially if it's on rocks. Like sometimes if you snag on branches, it's harder because it's like fibrous, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe not coming home. Totally true. Yep.
Well, that concludes our Q&A part 1 here in season 4 of the Noob and the Knower podcast. If you like the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you leave a review on Apple. That helps us get new listeners. We figured out that if you search for us on Apple, we haven't been able to show up. So if anyone knows how to fix that, that would be awesome. Please reach out. And then please follow us on Instagram at _noob_and_the_knower.
What an easy name.
Yeah, it's not hard at all. And we'd love to have you. And you can always DM us. And I think that's about it. Lance, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
I don't think so. Thank you all for the questions. As Pablo started at the beginning, we appreciate the people that sent us questions, and I'm sure we'll get more, and we look forward to answering more in the next podcast.
Yep, that's right. All right, y'all. We look forward to bringing you part 2 in a few weeks. See ya.